Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's sessions. We're so happy to see so many of you with us today. And of course, we are recording the session. So if you're watching this afterwards, welcome. But this is going to be a really exciting webinar where we're going to talk about ethical AI in recruitment. And of course, we have two guests to talk about this. They'll introduce themselves shortly. But my name is Tove. I'm head of marketing at Jobylon, and I'll be the one moderating the session today. So I'll take you through this topic together with our experts. And for those of you who are new to us at Jobylon, we're a talent acquisition suite focusing primarily on enterprise companies across the globe and helping them succeed with their hiring. So we offer really powerful and flexible ATS. We are very candidate and customer focused. So we have a very strong customer success team. Of course, we also offer candidate and customer feedback forms. So we have a few products in our suite that are very appreciated. So check us out if you aren't really familiar with us yet. But for now, enough about Jobylon until we get to Alex to introduce himself. But Frederick, would you start introducing yourself and also Hubert?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Fredrik Törn. I am the Chief Product Officer with Hubert. And for those of you who don't know Hubert, we are an agentic platform for conducting structured AI-based, skills-based, competency-based interviews for high-volume recruitment, so that all candidates are invited to have an interview with our chatbot Hubert. And then we assess the answers, and of course, without knowing anything about, the age, gender, ethnicity, religion, or good looks of the candidate. And then we rank the candidates based on their answers. And then we provide a shortlist to recruiters so that they can move on with the final stages of these candidates in the final stages of the recruitment process.
Very, very good. Thank you, Frederick. We're so excited to have you with us. And our second speaker today, Alex, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Alex quite recently joined Jobylon, or I mean, I worked for a month, then I went on parental leave. So bye for a few months, and then came back. So I think this is like my 8th week at Jobylon. So I still feel very new at the job, and I think I will have that feeling for a few more weeks at least. But I'm the CPO, and it's been so nice to get started working at Jobylon to get to know the product and our customers. My background is in psychology. I'm a psychologist by trade, and been working a lot in the assessment industry. So very excited to be here and talking about, because that's something that we're going to discuss a little bit, like how to assess candidates in interview in an ethical way, right? With AI.
Exactly. And we're really excited to have both of you with us, especially because you have such a broad experience base, both of you, and especially combined. So this is going to be, we're going to be able to take a lot of different angles in the discussion today, which is fun. Now, what are we talking about today? Well, we have quite a few things to talk about, but I'm going to launch a poll here because we also want to hear what you're concerned about. So I have launched a poll. Please answer it, those of you who are with us live. And we'd be happy to hear what your biggest concern within AI is today, or AI in recruitment. But what are we talking about? Well, so we're covering the current state of the nation for AI and recruitment. So there's new regulations. Where are we at right now? What are people focusing on, or what should you be focusing on? We're also going to, of course, talk about what ethical AI actually is, including some frameworks from both Alex and Frederick in terms of how to approach ethical AI. And then we're also going to talk about the recruitment process itself. So where and how can you use AI to make the most use of it, and also avoid maybe some of the pitfalls that we still see within AI. Now, we will do a Q&A at the end of the session. So use the chat, use the Q&A function, ask your questions, and we'll take them towards the end of the session today. And we are recording, of course, the session, as I mentioned earlier. So if you have to drop out, or if you're watching this, I mean, you can always watch it afterwards. We'll send the recording out to you after the webinar is finished. But okay, let me check. So we have had some replies here. I'm going to end the poll just so that we can kind of see what the results were. And I guess speakers, can you also see what the results were?
Yeah.
So we see that bias and discrimination, 42% are concerned about. Legal risks, 44%. Candidate experience, 50%. Lack of transparency is only 19%. Return on investment, 8%. Being replaced by AI, 33%. And then we have a few percentages for other. So if you have any concerns or any comments on this, please use the chat as well to comment on this. Alex and Frederick, any surprises in the data here from our listeners today?
Well, people seem very concerned. That would
In general.
in general, people are very concerned.
Yeah.
And I think the the results are not necessarily surprising in the sense that that compliance and legal risk is important, because I think we have this webinar in light of the EU AI Act, but not necessarily only in light of the EU AI Act, but that has definitely been a catalyst for the whole conversation of ethical AI. But I think we might have had that discussion anyhow.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we would have had this discussion anyhow.
Exactly. And I think that leads us into our starting point for the discussion today as well, which is, why are we talking about this right now, right? Because responsible AI, ethical AI, we at Jobylon have talked about it for quite a long time. Other companies have. I mean, this has been a discussion point, but at the same time, people seem to be really, really interested in hearing about this now and actually taking the time to have this discussion now. Why is this that we're kind of in the midst of this discussion now, which seems kind of late if you think of the implementation of AI? Alex, do you want to start?
Well, as we said, one part of it is, of course, that the AI Act is being implemented. And one thing that I'm thinking about is that, it's been wild west when it comes to AI for a few years. When GPT launched, I think people were like, oh, this is the future. And you started thinking about the possibilities, and you started building stuff, and people were implementing it everywhere. And now when the sort of dust has settled a little bit, people are like, oh, okay, actually there are some implications about using this in certain areas. And then of course recruitment is one of them, where you need to go like, oh, wait, hold up a minute. Is this really the way we should be working? And does this really fit into the process of how to do this? So I think that is one part of it as well. Like, we sort of like, now we have a bit of distance to it and understand that it is a tool and it's a really useful tool. But you need to be wary of using it, of course, depending on what your use case is.
Absolutely. Frederick, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that, Alex. I guess it's a sign of maturity, right? That we're going from the wild west into and realizing that there are some challenges or problems with some applications or technologies, and then in light of that, we realize that we need to have the discussion to separate the good usage of AI from what is a bad usage, essentially. Of AI, but then again, the legislation, of course, works as a catalyst in advancing this discussion rapidly, because now it's not August 2026, which is the big line in terms of high risk AI. Is not that far away. Essentially, if you are a big company and you have to undertake the processes that you need to have, etc., and that's it's not a very long time. And to be honest, the legislation in national law isn't there yet. So it's going to be a shortage of time, I think, for many businesses in the coming 10 months or whatever it is.
And we're going to get back into discussing the regulation a little bit in just a few minutes. But I think there are also some other things happening right now in terms of discussions that are happening in the market. We've seen some lawsuits on bias, for example. We've seen a lot of discussion when it comes to black boxing data and not being that transparent with what's actually happening. So that maturity that you're mentioning, Frederick, I mean, it feels like companies have kind of come to the realization that everything isn't as good as they first hoped or anticipated, maybe. What are your comments on these, if we start with maybe bias and that discussion? Frederick, I think you can start.
Who's gonna?
So polite, both of you.
I mean, bias and discrimination. I mean, there has been legislation on discrimination for a long time, right? But I think with an increased knowledge of how AI works and how it is trained, and highlighting the fact that AI can be based on human data, which is not necessarily unbiased, that realization has caused an understanding and a discussion on the importance. And again, there's some legislation that has gone, that has been in practice now for quite some time. I'm thinking, for instance, about the New York City Law 144, which states that vendors in these type of assessment solutions, if they're automated, they need to provide a third-party bias report, for instance. That's a very concrete example of bias regulation, which is in effect already now.
Alex, what's your take on this?
No, but I mean, we had a really good discussion about this before, and if we just zoom out a little bit and actually go back in time, I mean, this is not something new. We have applied AI, or more like machine learning algorithms, to recruitment for quite some time, and we've seen that there's been some issues with them. I mean, the most common case that people know about is the Amazon case that built a CV screening bot that preferred men over women because that was the data was trained. It was like, men tend to get the job, so we're gonna make sure that men are sort of selected in the CV screening. We have another interview bot system that actually looked at facial expressions and could make distinguish and sort of score the candidate based on their facial expressions. And people were like, "Oh, that's not a great idea." So in reality, it's not something new. It's just that now we have a different type of AI, which is the LLM, which actually helps us in a certain degree. We talked about this beforehand, Fredrik, right? That LLMs like ChatGPT or whatever type of model you're using can actually help with the black box problem, because that was the issue before, that you had this bot that looked at your face and it said 87, but you couldn't explain why it gave you the 87. Like there was no way to get that explanation. But now when we come to a more, we have more sophisticated and much better understanding of these type of tools, we can actually go back and say, oh, it's based on this, and this is the explanation as to why this score or why this summarization was done. So it's interesting as well that even though these new technologies have been a little bit in the wild west, it's also been an enabler for more ethical and transparent AI. Or you of it.
That's a really interesting approach too, to think about it as not just a problem in itself, but actually an enabler to help mitigate some of the issues. So kind of the full circle moment to that. Very interesting. But let's dive a little bit into regulation. And I'm going to actually send out another poll question here, which is, how ready is your company for the EU AI Act? It's going to be interesting to see how you're feeling in the room. But when it comes to the EU AI Act, I mean, as you mentioned, Frederick, the date is creeping closer, and we kind of have to, at some point, all companies will have to recognize the fact that they need to make some changes, maybe, or some choices, at least when it comes to this. But how ready are companies that you talk to in the capacity of offering an AI software? How ready do you perceive people being for this?
Well, they are much more ready now than a year ago, and the level of maturity in the type and the level of maturity is so much higher. The questions we get asked are so much more, more detailed, and there is a higher interest in understanding the strengths, but also the risks involved with using AI in recruitment and in candidate assessment. To be honest, I don't think all organizations that use AI for assessment or in the recruitment processes have undergone the requirements of AI literacy, which should have been in place already in February this year. But I think there is a general, willingness and interest in adhering to the law. But I think many companies also are looking for some kind of, guidance and explanation. All right, what is an appropriate level of AI literacy? What's a reasonable level here? And that guidance is vague or non-existent, and I think that's a challenge to many organizations.
Absolutely. I'm gonna end the poll so that you can see the results here, where we see that 59% of the ones tuning in today feel somewhat prepared, but haven't sorted everything out. And 30% feel like they're scrambling, so not prepared enough. And only 3% feel fully prepared, which I think says a lot. I think it's a pretty expected view on where companies are at, I would say, at least from my understanding.
I wonder how many were like, wait, what did Fredrik just say? Do you need to have an AI literacy in place? I wonder how many were like, oh,
That's true. We should run that poll as well. How many
Yeah.
of you knew about this?
yeah.
Oh. But that's a good point. But Alex, from your point of view, what should recruiters, what should vendors think about when it comes to the EU AI Act? And maybe Fredrik should comment on this as well. But I think
Yeah,
it's an
definitely.
interesting point to take, because we of course have the vendor side, but we also have the company side who are actually buying from vendors. And we'll look at some frameworks and see kind of how you can think about that a little bit. But what should you think about in today's, like, from both sides, I guess?
I'm gonna start by actually answering the question that you gave to Fredrik, because I find that one interesting as well, like how ready are companies? Because I've been to a lot of customer meetings recently, and one thing that I've actually been really like happily surprised about is that people have been bringing their IT department as some representative, at least from like so they like can look at this and go, oh, that this might actually be a risk, or this might not be a risk, and actually assessing it when we're talking about things, because different companies have different levels of compliance depending on what they're working in. So it's been really nice to see that they've been able to go and have someone with them that can help them as well to sort of navigate the territories. Like, yeah, that's fine. We can implement that. That feature we need to actually look at and see if we can implement, because there might be some legal issues regarding that. So I feel like people are much more mentally prepared for these type of things. I feel like there's a strong feeling that people want to implement and benefit from AI. And I just want to give one comment there. I've said this one before. Also, when I talk to a lot of customers, they talk about AI, but what they actually ask when it comes down to it is automation. They want stuff to go from A to B to C to D, which is not AI. That's just like automations and triggers. But of course, you can add, like Fredrik, you do at Hubert, like more an agentic approach where you have someone doing it for you and sort of passing the candidate along the recruitment process, which is a next level type of automation, of course. But I found that a lot of people are super eager to get going, but they feel a little bit restricted about, because they're fearing the AI Act and what the complications are. And I mean, truth be told, I think people are a bit confused. Even Ulf Kristersson, Swedish Prime Minister, said he's confused about the AI Act. So like, I think there's a lot of confusion about what it means and how to implement it, which also gives into the sense that people are like, I don't actually really know what it means. But people are like scrambling, as we saw in the poll, going, okay, I'll bring my IT responsibility person that can actually sit in the meeting and give me a yes or a no.
But that's a smart approach. That's a really good tip, actually, for companies who are in discussions. Bring somebody along with you to help
Or
you out.
legal sometimes as well, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to vendors, then from that angle, how are you thinking about the EU AI Act, Fredrik? Are there ways that certain vendors are approaching this versus others, and that would be good for companies to know how vendors are approaching this?
Yeah, I mean, so if you're a vendor in this space, and according the EU AI Act has a number of requirements from you, and that also not only involves that you need to provide documentation and criteria for the product that you're providing, but you also you're required to provide something called instructions for use, that you are to inform the the customer about. And I think the EU AI Act has the intention of thinking about compliance um, as a two-way relationship. It's a joint responsibility, if you like, between the vendor and the customer in achieving, in this case, a good, a reasonable and ethical candidate experience, which is also high quality from a recruit point of view. So I think that's as a company, you should work together with your vendors on delivering this compliance. And also the act, stresses that compliance and ethics in this case is not a one-off event that you do that and then you file it. It's rather a very much ongoing process, and you, as a vendor, you need to have routines established for how to inform your customers if something would go wrong, and inform them so that the customers can take action. Also, as a customer, you need to have proper procedures in place for understanding what the AI solution is all about, the risks that it involves. You need to train the people, and you also need to have routines in place if something should go wrong, so that you can go to manual state, and also inform regulators if there's been some kind of violation of the compliance. So it's very much a joint process, a joint and a process, if you like.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Sorry, just a super comment about that. It's like, with the GDPR, it was essentially like you have one person that's sort of one entity that's responsible. But with the AI Act, actually, there's two. So you have the vendor, of course, but as you're saying, Fredrik, it's also like you can't just buy a tool and go like, oh, the vendor is all good. They have all the certifications. It's also about how you apply it and actually use the tool. That is the big thing. And you can actually fudge that process up and end up in a situation where you're using the tool in a very bad way and not the intended way, and then end up in a situation where you're using it wrong. And I think that was the whole Workday versus Mobley thing. If you don't know about that, with the whole discrimination thing, is that Workday, they were saying, no, our AI bot is not, it's not discriminating, but also it's not our problem, because someone is using our, and they need to be in charge of making sure that they're using it the right way. They're like, we can't be responsible for all of our users. We have 1 billion people that have gone through our AI screening device. But then the courts were like, actually, no, you are responsible. You are the one providing this thing. So
Mm.
even if people use it incorrectly, you need to make sure it's being used in a correct way. So it's interesting. There's a two-way street here, and that's what you're saying, Fredrik. And I think people are missing that. You can't just buy a tool and go, yeah, happy, go lucky. You need to think about how you implement it, when and how, and if you're using it in the right intention.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think going from regulation, it's one thing, understanding it, and another thing, of course, adhering to it. We saw that with GDPR in general, as you brought that up, Alex. I mean, companies have wildly different interpretations of what that means as well, which I'm expecting us to see with the EU AI Act as well, to some degree. And that's definitely something to follow along with, and see how companies are doing this and what we can learn from each other, and to be responsible yourself. And that kind of brings us in the responsibility aspect, or the ethical AI of it, right? So how are we actually using AI? And I think before we go into some frameworks, which you both have different frameworks, but overlapping, when it comes to ethical AI, I think we should first try to define it. Alex, what would be your definition of ethical AI? Difficult question, I
Oh,
know.
you put on the spot. Can't Fredrik start? Then I can piggyback on his answer.
I was really happy that Alex got that question
Oh
first.
no, I'm so sorry.
I think ethical AI is about developing solutions or developing processes that you can which are sound, respectful, and also deliver a high quality there is some qualitative aspect. It's not only about fairness, but it's also about delivering high quality. I think that's part of the ethical and responsible AI. I don't make a distinction here between ethical and responsible. Like, well, I think they fall very much into the same bucket. I think there is an element of consciousness also involved here, that it's that you are accountable, you are in control of your AI usage.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, if I'm gonna attempt this, I think we also need to think about what it isn't. Maybe that can answer what it is. One thing that I'm struggling with now and looking at different types of tools, that you smack on an AI on top of a thing. So you have this human-built recruitment process, and you just add an AI tool on top of it, like summarizing a already AI-written AI CV. And then the question you should ask is like, does this really add value, or am I adding an AI step on top of an already built process? So I think what is ethical AI is actually using it where it adds value, where it actually is something that, like you were saying, Fredrik, like is it enhancing the candidate experience? Is it saving time? Is it making sure that we are providing a good process? Or we ending up with a better hiring decision? Like, you need to ask these questions before you start implementing stuff. You can't just go around shooting a shotgun and going like, and we're gonna add AI.
Mm. Very good. I think this was kind of a trick question because, of course, we're getting into your frameworks. So that was me challenging both of you, but I think you did a good job. We got the question here where you think AI adds value in the recruitment process, and don't you worry, we're getting into that as well. But we're going to talk about your frameworks first, and starting with Fredrik, we're going to take you through the framework that you use at Hubert, or an overview of it at least.
Yeah.
So do you want me to bring all of this up for you?
Yeah, I think you can actually bring all of the pillars, because it's not a process, it's rather so based on the research that is out there, and but also inspired by the legislation, we realized we needed to develop a framework that would encompass what we think constitutes ethical or responsible AI. And it involves 6 pillars, 6 dimensions, if you like, starting with the obvious, fairness. Of course, we need to have a solution that is fair and where we mitigate bias, so that recruiters can be confident that hiring recommendations don't reflect any hidden biases that could expose the company to legal or reputational risk, and also that candidates know that the assessments are monitored for equity, and make sure that no demographic groups are unfairly disadvantaged. And there are, of course, tools for doing that, doing bias audits on your own, or using third parties for assessing fairness. I think that's one key aspect of ethical AI. But as you see, there are 5 more. The second is about explainability, and we touched upon that briefly, i.e. that recruiters have the opportunity to understand what the system is about, what's under the hood, if you like, so that a responsible solution can explain how the assessment is done, what are the algorithms behind an assessment, so that recruiters can feel confident about the assessment being fair and consistent and of high quality, of course. And also the flip side of that is also, or the other aspect is, of course, that candidates can also feel that they know what's being assessed and why, and this can help them feel being treated fairly, and again reducing this whole black box effect, essentially shedding light into making the black box transparent. That's what explainability is.
I mean, you don't want to end up in a situation where you have a candidate going like, hey, by the way, I mean, I didn't proceed in this recruitment process. Can you just explain to me why I didn't progress from the first step? And all you have is a score, which is like 67. And you go, I I wouldn't be able to explain that to you. I,
Exactly. You don't want to end up there. I mean,
that's
and,
not a nice
and
situation to be in.
and to be honest, there are solutions out there. And or if you make some kind of naive, you ask ChatGPT to screen a CV for you, you can end up in a score or a similar situation where you actually don't have that explainability. But by providing that explainability to recruiters and to candidates, you open up the black box, and that's very ethical.
Mm.
But it's not only about explainability, it's also about quality, right? We need to have a solution or system that actually is accurate, that measures accuracy, measures validity, and makes sure that the product is valid for the assessment that it purports to do, so that high scoring candidates are actually good candidates. Essentially, that's what it's all about.
I mean, same with
And
you want
that the validity is predictive of success or quality of candidates, essentially.
and you would have the same things if you used like an assessment provider. You would ask the same questions, right? You would want like
Yeah, yeah,
credibility, what's the reliability, what is the outcome we're looking for.
exactly. And that, of course, makes it might sound trivial, but again, it's a requirement that you should, as a customer, you should all, of course, ask about the validity and the quality accuracy measures. And also, the legislation actually demands that you provide those accuracy numbers. It doesn't say how. It should provide an appropriate level of accuracy. But again, but at least it's a requirement, an explicit requirement of accuracy being present. Repeatability. This is actually super interesting, I think, because in the age of LLMs and GPTs, repeatability and consistency is actually not necessarily always the case with some of the solutions. We think that it's very important that the same answer should be given the same score at all times. And there is some very interesting research being done now where solutions that are built on top of an LLM for assessment, they are essentially providing different results at different times. They can still be, explainable and on average have high quality. It's just that they are not very consistent. So you can still be an unlucky candidate depending on what the load on the LLM was, for instance, at that time.
So comment on that. I mean, that's if you go into an LM and you see the bar called temperature. If I don't know if you looked at that, because you can actually tune the models, and it's one of the settings called temperature. So the higher that one is, the more it's gonna like freestyle, and the lower it is, the more consistent and it's gonna be. But you still have that creativity aspect of it. So if you're interested, if you want more the same type of answers, lower the temperature on the model. Sorry.
Definitely. And in this case, I mean, you should lower it as much as possible. But still,
Exactly. For a
even though you do that, you still run the risk of having different different outcomes, because that's how LLMs are built. Of course, that's something that Hubert, we are proud to say that we are fully consistent because we're not using LLMs for our assessment. But I think as a recruiter, you should consider this repeatability issue. Security, of course, this is very much in line with GDPR, but you need to make sure that the data that is handled are stored securely, and the data privacy is cared for. I think it's not rocket science, and this is bringing it's very obvious, but nevertheless should be part of the ethical AI dimensions. And finally, human oversight. The regulation will demand that there is a possibility for humans in the loop at all times, but it also, has demands on very clear understanding of who is accountable for what stages of the process and what and well, yeah, generally being accountable for the various steps of the process of the product, and that the human, we cannot only trust the AI to do something. We always have to be in charge and be in control as humans. And I think that's that's also a key part of the of being a truly ethical and responsible AI solution.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to kind of summarize these 6 pillars and how to approach this. I feel like this is a really neat way to be able to segment and think about, okay, these are the aspects that we need to keep in mind, but human oversight feels like a very important endpoint for that. And feeding then into Alex, your kind of framework, or the framework that we use as well internally. It's more high level, I would say, more
Yeah.
conceptual, maybe.
More conceptual, and I
Yeah.
just to add something to what Fredrik said, like so if you're listening into this call, I think that these type of questions about transparency, security, these are things you should ask the vendors about before just implementing a tool. So if you're sitting here thinking about adding a new AI thing to your box, you ask these questions that Fredrik sort of talked about, because I think they make sense.
And we will actually send out a document with some questions to ask based on this. So you'll have a little guide to help you in your next purchase of a vendor as well.
Yeah, so just being in this meeting, you're more AI responsible than most people. So
Exactly,
you
exactly.
go.
Just great, great.
Yeah.
Good job, everyone who's here. All right, but I'm gonna click this one up and let you talk about this one, Alex.
Essentially, like sort of where we are right now is very much focused on responsible AI, and that's not going to disappear then when we go into the next phases, because we know technology is evolving. We're seeing it, rapidly. There's things happening all the time. And what we're seeing now is like going into the next phase from very responsible, a lot of human oversight type of AI implemented in recruitment process to what we call like more empowering the users. And that's stuff where most people are right now. It's like being able to summarize interviews, or being able to screen or use Hubert as an instance to save time, or using it to write job ads, which can of course be somewhat problematic. But that's sort of where most people are. But if we look at where the trend is going, it's definitely going more into an agentic approach. And that's what we discussed a little bit earlier, that, essentially set up a recruitment process. And you said that these are the things we want to assess. And then you have bots or agents helping you along the way, assessing those type of things. And we're looking into this very, very intensively at Jobylon and setting up flows. So essentially a candidate can apply for a job, get a text on WhatsApp. They can answer screening questions in the WhatsApp chat, or be called up to do the interview via phone, and then actually straight up being booked for an interview via the WhatsApp channel that they're already doing, and then do the interview via phone and then proceed to the next step. So like these type of things. So like, passing the candidate along the recruitment process in a very nice, and also being where the candidate is, which I think is a really cool way of doing it as well, like because people are more on their phones. And also for the hiring manager to be able to not having to interact so much, so like they can respond like, yeah, please proceed with this candidate to the next step, and the candidate just moves along in the recruitment process. That's where we're going. That's where we're heading. And I think there's a lot of things that we need to consider by going there. But that is the future, and that's I guess why 30% were somewhere like, what's going to happen to my job? Because that sounds like a lot of the things that you're doing. But being truthful to ourselves, a lot of that is admin. Calendar ping is worst thing in the world. Like trying to find a time in the hiring manager's schedule. How annoying isn't that? Screening interviews. Of course you can do them very interactively, but sometimes you just want to get that information. And a static form might not be the case. Then Hubert is a much better solution. They can actually do it more interactively, which increases the candidate experience. You still get the same data or even better data, but you do in a different form.
Mm.
Yeah, that was my point.
Very good. Very quick pitch, which brings us on to how should an AI-powered recruitment process look like? So now we've actually, I mean, we've talked about regulation, we've talked about frameworks, what you should think about to kind of keep this ethical approach and what does that mean? But let's take a look at the actual recruitment process. And to make this easy, we've kind of segmented all the parts of the recruitment process into 5 different segments, just so that we can talk about each one. But let's start with prep and setup. So where should AI be used here versus where should it not? And in the interest of time and wanting to get into the Q&A, I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask you both to be quick and firm on this. Where should it? Where should it not? Yes, no, do it.
Boom. Really nice if you set up an interview with the hiring manager to get up the requirement profile. Amazing to summarize the interview so you get the really good structured requirement profile that can be used to then set up the process. So it's not just a form that's being sent in or your notes during that meeting. It's a really good way of using a transcribing module to get a summarized version of the requirement profile.
And you can
Perfect.
also use, LLMs for making checklists to make sure that, the job description is complete and, comprehensive.
Yeah,
Mm,
or even going further, you can actually set up your own competency framework
Yeah.
using an LLM and use that as the framework that you use. So when you're going in to decide what you want to assess, you have a framework to go from. Yeah.
very good. Okay. Are there any use cases where we shouldn't use AI? This is very early, of course. It's before we start handling personal data and things like that. But is there anything here that you should consider not
I mean,
using
maybe it
AI?
goes into the next one, which is about, yeah, maybe it is the one writing the job ad. I know it's really tempting, and you can, and you can definitely get there some part of the way using it. I just want then you need to look at the human oversight thing and actually see what has been written, what it's doing, because otherwise you may use writing AI slob, and we don't want that. And there's but actually tools that can help you with that are AI based to make it more inclusive and get the language better and helping you write a better job ad. So you can get
Mm,
it better, but just keep in mind in what you're writing and how you're doing it.
mm, very good. Okay, and going into sourcing and marketing then. So sourcing wise, of course, there are some AI softwares available, but I know from previous discussions there are some potential issues here, maybe, or things that you need to think about.
I think it's really good. I think there's a lot of really cool sourcing tools out there. The issue is when there's a scoring being done, just make sure that you understand how that scoring is being done. Like Fredrik was saying, the explainability of that. So you don't just go based on it. And I think there's a lot of cool tools out there that actually have a lot of explainability about this is the requirement profile. These are the things that the person has done, which is in line with the requirement profile, hence the score. And you can even weigh the score yourself. So I think it's a really cool way, and there's a nice way, and there's coming a lot more tools here where you can actually nurture and attract candidates before they even get interested in the job. So like social advertising, and now you even have bots that can contact candidates. But there's market territory going on there, like being called up on AI bot saying, "Hey, I'm calling from Jobylon. I have this job for you."
Yeah, maybe not. We'll see where we go with that one. Anything when it comes to recruitment marketing, which is, of course, also something that a lot of companies are focusing a lot on.
Yeah, like programmatic advertising is super interesting. It seems to work really well. So there's a lot of vendors out there that can do that. Just make sure that you ask the questions that Fredrik said, like how is it done? How does it work? And so
Mm,
on.
very good. Uh, Selection and first assessments. Now, of course, we're very much into Hubert territory. Frederick, what do you
Yeah,
say what should you do? What shouldn't you do here?
I think so. Again, going back to what Alex said before, I mean, the litmus test for use of AI here is that if AI, add, can add speed, fairness, or clarity, it's a good thing. If it does not do that, then it shouldn't be used, right? So if in high volume recruitment you have hundreds of candidates, AI can reduce can improve the speed, reduce your burden of this administrative repetitive task, and also deliver better candidate performance and higher quality, to be honest, than humans can. Then I think it makes perfect sense to do that. If you have very few applicants, it's a very specialist position, then you actually might not want to use an AI. You might want to actively sell that position to the few candidates that have expressed an interest in this position, and make that a very, very human process, because it's not so much a selection process of you selecting candidates, it's rather candidates selecting you.
Yeah, one thing I should add, I think that just interesting that maybe it's like a layer on top. I really do enjoy these type of like conversational type of AI where you can actually get reminded. So like Fredrik, for instance, like how you can, like you haven't answered these questions. Are you still interested in the job? And actually approaching the candidate to make sure that they actually stay in the process to keep your drop-off rate really low. That's one added value where we see a lot of potential going forward, and also helping you sort of keeping people interested in the job and keeping them in the loop. That's more like the agentic approach on top of all of this, but it can help you get those answers to the assessment provider you're having without having to, go and manually actually contact people. You can have bots doing that for you, which works really well, which is a good case for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of goes throughout the recruitment process, right? In terms of
Yeah.
communication and in terms of utilizing it for things like, again, administrative tasks, but also keeping candidates warm throughout the
Yeah.
process. Sounds like it's a good use case. When it comes to later assessment points or interviews, things like that, any thoughts there on where AI should be used versus not?
AI scheduling, so nice to have those type of features where you don't have to, you make sure that your calendar is available and the candidate can pick a time to go to the interview. And of course, there's so many cool ways of handling the interview with transcribing it, summarizing it, and even sending it into the correct scorecards or
Mm.
feedback forms, whatever you're using. It saves so much time and also cognitive load, which you out there who sat down and did 6 interviews in a row, you know how painful that is, but it is nice to have someone taking notes for you. So huge improvement to a otherwise very, very time-intensive process.
Mm.
And AI can also help you be more structured in even in the later stages of the interview, not just the initial ones that Hubert typically does. Just to keep you, and keeping the process more structured and keeping the interviews more structured also ensures better quality of the assessment of the interview, and also reduces bias significantly.
Mm. Very, very good. And then we reach the last part here, final selection. Where versus not?
I think this should still be a very human decision. Again, going back to the human oversight and accountability. I think that humans should make the final decisions, but they are, happily advised on and recommended using inputs from AIs before that selection.
Yeah, I think it can be used to sort of maybe count scenarios about like scenarios for salary or starting date and stuff like that. That can be really useful just to make sure that you sort of end up in a good situation. But I agree, the decisions will always be human. But it's nice what you can use AI for is to, like getting a summary, like a dashboard or a summary of what has been done throughout the recruitment process to make it easier to make that decision. But then you need to make sure that that summary is actually explainable and goes back to real data, so you don't make an assumption or something that's not true.
Yeah, or that you don't have a biased summary that you're then sending over to compare and make the final
Not
decision.
very bad.
Yeah, very bad. Good summary there. All right, let's do some key takeaways from this discussion, which of course have covered so many different aspects of ethical AI, what it is, regulation, but also frameworks, how can we work with this, and also where in the recruitment process. And then we'll go into Q&A, and I see that we're getting some great questions here, so keep adding them to the chat and Q&A, and we'll take them shortly. But when it comes to key takeaways, I think there are 3 things that we can focus on here. So, Fredrik, I'm going to let you summarize these first 2, and then I'll leave the third to Alex.
Yeah. So we started by saying that the AI Act and other types of regulations, stimulate this discussion. But to be honest, it's if we ignore the legal aspects here, I think, and consider reputational risk and employer branding and the opportunities, of ethical and AI responsible recruitment, then think of this as an opportunity that using the tools in a correct way that can actually make you as an employer more attractive in the eyes of candidates. So think of it in a positive light. And as we said, compliance, use your vendors for establishing compliance. It's a shared process where you can work together to deliver a fantastic candidate experience.
Very good. And Alex, the last point here.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in the assessment industry for a long time, and oh my goodness gracious Lord, there's so many bad processes out there. Like they're so unstructured as hiring managers make a decision on their gut feeling, yada yada. It's like I can promise you that not using AI then is so much more unethical, unethical than if you have a very human-driven process that is so inconsistent and rife with unchecked bias, which is the last point. Because that is worse than having the gut feeling type of recruitment process that are so common. So you're making yourself a disservice with not using it.
Yeah, we're talking about the criticism on AI for being a black box models, right? But there's nothing more black boxy than a human, I'm afraid. And AI, one of the advantages of AI is that you have tools for measuring bias, for measuring explainability, and that's actually very that's an enabler which the human processes not necessarily can offer.
Yeah, as long as you can explain it is better. And you can't even explain a human and hiring manager's brain because it's probably depending on what type of day it is. We know that the closer you get to Friday, the closer you get to 5 o'clock each day, the quicker a hiring manager makes up a decision. And in an interview, it goes down to 90 seconds. I think an AI actually has a lot more patience than that.
It's like when they say you should schedule an interview right after lunch, right? And not right before.
Yeah.
So, yeah. There's a lot of data on that. But I think that's a really good point to end on in terms of AI might not be perfect, but neither are we, right? So we need to look at what will actually benefit us and the candidates the most. And speaking of that, let's go into the Q&A. The first question that came in a while ago here is that how does AI impact the candidate experience? Is it positive or negative? And I think, Fredrik, you alluded to this, right? That it can be positive for the candidate experience. But what do we know right now?
Handled correctly, it can definitely be better. One of the opportunities, of course, with using AI is that all candidates get a chance to come to an interview. And again, compared to a typical manual process where many candidates are not screened. Let's face the fact that in many processes, candidate CVs are not being looked at all, or don't get a chance to come on to the second interview or to a first interview because their application ends up in a paper bin. That's also a case where, and compared to that total silence that many candidates are exposed to. I think having an AI-based process which can have a personal meeting at scale for each and every candidate, I think that's a huge improvement.
Absolutely. Another question that came in here is, I guess, piggybacking a little bit on the GDPR, but how important is the EU AI Act really when it comes to smaller companies? I'm guessing leading into, are we actually going to be audited if we're a small company? What is your thinking here? Alex, if we start with you, maybe.
Yeah, sure. I mean, is being unethical important to your company? If you think it's okay to be unethical, yeah, go ahead. Do your thing, I guess.
Yeah, Fredrik.
I mean, for any company, and especially for small companies, I think the legal risk is lower than the reputational risk. And reputational risk can be a problem also for small companies. So again, you shouldn't do it just because the legislation says it's the way to do it. You should do it because it's the proper way to do it, from a human point of view, if you like.
From a human point of view. I think that's a great way to wrap this up. We went a little bit over time, but we're so happy to see so many of you with us still. And of course, the recording will be sent out afterwards, as well as some other assets, including a checklist for what to ask when you're trying to find new vendors. But I wanted to thank you both, Frederick and Alex, for being here and sharing your thoughts on this topic. And I think a great way to end on that note. If you don't want to be ethical, then don't care about this. But from a human approach, maybe that should be pretty obvious that we should all care about this, which I think is great. So hopefully this gave everyone listening in a good starting point to take this discussion on and drive this forward so that we can all use AI in an ethical way. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to all of you who have listened in and asked questions as well. And connect with our speakers on LinkedIn, and I'm sure they'll be happy to continue the discussion. Bye, everyone.
Have a great day.